Okay, so I welcome you to this lesson of checkmate. In the last lesson, we learned all about checks, how to give checks with different pieces, how to get away from checks by using different methods of blocking the check, capturing the attacking piece, and by moving away from the check to a safe square. Now, in this lesson, we'll learn what is a checkmate. Now, if the king can escape from a check, it is simply a check, but in a unique position. And I will just show an example. Let us say I'll put the rook here. Okay, now the black king is under a check. And if we see how to make the black king go to a safe place, it is not possible because the escape squares, all these, are under the range of the white king. And as we have already learned, the most important rule of chess, the king cannot be placed under attack of any of the opponent's pieces. Very important rule to remember. So in this case, we have a very unique position. The black king is under attack from the white rook on h8, which covers the whole h file. So the king cannot move in any square along the h file. That is out of question. And the remaining three possibilities are these three squares, which I have highlighted, and all those three, unfortunately, are under attack by the white king. So this position is known as a checkmate. We say the black king has been checkmated. It is under check and cannot go to any safe square. Neither can the white rook be captured by any of the black pieces because there are none. Very important concept. This is the only way to win a game of chess, by checkmating the opponent. So we'll see some more examples. We'll go to the next one, and very similar to one which we saw the last time. There is only one possibility again here to give a check, and for that I have to take the rook all the way up to a8, and yes, it is a checkmate because similarly, as we saw in the last example, the rook is giving a check to the white king, as we can see like that. And the three possible escape squares which are not on the 8th rank are under control of the white king on e6. So the king is under a check, cannot move to a safe place, and is known to be a checkmated. So this is the last move of the game, and white wins the game. So if you go for competition, as I hope you will after completing this course, in a competition, the winner gets 1 point, the loser gets 0 point, and if for some reason game becomes equal or is a draw, both people will get half points each. In this case, white is the winner of the game. Rook 8 will be the last move of the game. And if you see the hash notation which we see, hash is the notation for a checkmate. So white has checkmated the black king and wins the game. We'll go to the next example. And again, we are still with the rook. This typical checkmate is also known as the back rank checkmate because the rook goes to the last rank and gives a checkmate. We'll see some more examples of this in another chapter. This is a very common type of checkmate where the rook or the queen gives a check from the last line and the king is trapped by its own pieces. This is little unlike the last example where the escape of the black king was blocked by the white pieces, by the white king. And in this case, the pawns themselves, the black pawns, are preventing the escape. So this is a checkmate. It's most important concept to understand. Let us see a few more examples. Okay, interesting idea. And again, still we are with the rook checkmates. Now, by now, I'm sure you would have understand how to give a check, and there is only one possibility in this position, which is taking the rook all the way up. Now let us see the possibilities which black can think about. So the king can try to come here, but unfortunately, this square is under control by the white pawn. We know the white pawns capture diagonally, they exert their influence diagonally. And other two escape squares are blocked by black's own pawns. So again, this is a checkmate. So I hope the concept is simple. We have a position where a king is under a check and cannot get out of the check. That is a checkmate. That is the logical end to the game. The person who gives the checkmate is the winner of the game. Okay. Now this is slightly more interesting, little more complex than the last one. I will share my thought process, what should be done in order to execute a checkmate in slightly more complex position. So now this example is very interesting in that there are multiple checks that are possible. I can take the rook to 8, I can take the rook to e7, I can bring the rook on h1 to e1. It is a check, and I have this possibility where the rook goes all the way up to h8 and gives a check. So unlike the last few examples where there was only one check, now we have so many checks possible. Now it is interesting to learn and understand how to figure that out. So to execute the checkmate, what we have to do? Now we know that we have to give a check in such a way that the opponent's king has no place to escape, right? So let us say we'll go one by one with all the possibilities that we found. So rook 8, for example, this is the first one we think about. We give a check, and the whole of the 8th rank now is inaccessible to the black king. But the king can come up, and there are 3 places where the black king can go to escape the check. So the rook 8 is a check, but it turns out it is not a checkmate. So we'll have to let that possibility go. We'll go to the next option. Let us say with this rook, I can take the white rook to e7. It is a check, but unfortunately not a very good one, because the black king can simply swing over one step up and capture the white rook. Or it can go to 2 squares which are sideways. So black has 3 options in which the black king is not checkmated. To avoid the checkmate, black has multiple options. So this is not also the move which we are looking for. Let us take our attention to the other rook. Now let us say I have this possibility of giving a check. Yes, but the king can move sideways. It cannot move up to these 2 squares because these 2 are covered by the white rook. So those are not possible, but the king can go sideways. So that is also not a checkmate. So now we have the 4th option and the final option, which is the rook to h8. And yes, it is a checkmate because the rook on h8 is covering whole of the 8th rank. So king cannot move to either of these squares, while an escape to the 7th rank is not possible because the other rook is covering all the squares. So rook h8 is the move which delivers a checkmate. But I'm sure you would find it interesting to think about the thought process which we went through to be able to find the move which actually gives a checkmate. We tried different options. Once with the rook on a7, we thought of different checks. They did not work. We found many checks, but there was always an option for the opponent to escape from the check or attack our piece and capture it. So we moved to the other rook, and finally we figured out a move in which we could give a check, our piece is safe, and there is no possibility for the black king to escape. And this is a checkmate. Checkmate, I would stress again, is the only way to end the game of chess logically. And I will encourage you to work on all these examples multiple times. And at the end of the course, I have given another 100 examples of checkmate, which will help you to practice your checkmating skills. Okay, with that, we'll go to the next example. Let us see with different pieces. Here still we are with the rook. So let us say I will leave this for you to work on your own, do the checkmate. I want to do the queen one. Let us see where it is. Okay, here we are. So we saw a few examples, around 4 or 5, in which the rook was able to give a checkmate. In this, we have the queen. Now, queen is a very powerful piece. And the queen has the possibility of giving a check from here. That would be the same diagonal. But I'm afraid that won't be a checkmate, because if I give a check from a3, the king will be able to move either of the sides on the squares g8 or e8. So that would not be a checkmate. I can take the king to g8. Let us see, figure out different checks what we have available. So one is a3, another is g8, and even another one is f7. So we have basically 3 possibilities of giving a check. And again, I will take you through the process of thinking which allows a player to arrive at a checkmate. Okay, so if I take the rook queen to g8, by now we are aware that the queen on g8 is an unsupported piece. It can be captured by the black king, and it will be very happy to do so. So I cannot place the queen on g8 because my queen will be captured. We already thought about the queen to a3, the diagonal check. And this leaves us with the only possibility of the queen to f7. Yes, and yes, it is a checkmate. The white queen, if you see, is supported by the white king. And king cannot capture anything which is supported. So which means the white queen cannot be captured. If it cannot be captured, then the king cannot move either ways also, because queen has, as we know, the power to go straight and along diagonals, right? So this position again is a checkmate. The piece which is giving the check cannot be captured, and there's no possibility for the black king to move to any safe square. Okay, let us go to the next example. Okay, numerically, if we see in this example, black has more pieces, but it is white who has the move. Okay, so I would give you a moment to think about. There are a few possibilities of giving a check. I can see 2, one on e8 and one on g8. Now take a moment to figure out which of them will give a checkmate to the black king. Okay, let us go through them one by one. So first possibility is queen to e8, give a check. and the other possibility is queen to g8. Okay. Now, if I bring the queen to e8, there are two problems with this. First of all, and the bigger one of that is the rook can simply capture my queen. Certainly, I don't want that. And I'll keep stressing this point again and again. Whenever you decide to put your piece to a particular square, the most important thing is to make sure that it is safe, that it cannot be captured by any of the opponent pieces. This is itself the most important chess skill, to keep your pieces safe. Okay, always keep that in mind. So, with that thought, we'll go to the next option, which is the queen to g8. And yes, it gives a check, and queen moves along a diagonal also. So, all the squares where the king can possibly go back are covered by the queen. And if it tries to go forward, this pawn is controlling this square, comes here, the king is controlling, and again here, this h5 square is both controlled by the king and the pawn. So, by logically thinking and going through options, we figure out the checkmate is queen g8. Okay, so by now, I am sure you are understanding and trying to go through the process of thinking about different possibilities, making sure that our piece is safe, and finally being able to execute the checkmate. Okay, let us go to the next one. Okay. Quite simple, but also very interesting. Any position where there are multiple possibilities of attack are always very interesting, because we have to figure out, after going through our thinking process, that which one of those attacking possibilities will actually be able to achieve the target, in this case, which is the checkmate. So let us see. We will find out the possibilities, also known as the candidate moves. It is a term which you will hear much more as you go to advanced lessons. The possibilities in chess are known as the candidates, the candidate moves. Let us see. As white, I have this possibility of putting the queen here, giving a check, putting the queen all the way here to h1, giving a check, taking the queen to the square b7 and giving a check, and finally taking the queen to a7 and giving a check. So by now, I'm sure we know the process. We have to find the possibilities and then go about them one by one. So queen e4 is the first move we thought about. It is a check, looks like a checkmate, but black rook can block. We learned how to block the checks. Yes, and in this case, the black rook can block the check. So it is not a checkmate. Next option is also taken care by the same defense, the rook to b7. So our first two options of giving the check along the diagonal did not work. So we have to go to the third and the fourth. The third option was queen to b7. It is a check, but unfortunately, our queen is undefended and can be captured both by the rook and the king. So that would not be a checkmate. And this leaves us to the last move, and that turns out to be the right one. The queen can go to a7, supported by the pawn on b6. When we put the queen to a7, we'll say the pawn is supporting the queen. And we already know by now, the king cannot capture anything which is supported by any of the opponent's pieces. We'll see some more interesting positions. In all these positions, in all these exercises, you have to execute the one move checkmate. The first move has to be a checkmate. So as we go ahead, positions will become more interesting, little bit complex, but if we use our thinking process, we'll be able to figure out the solutions. Now in this position, again, we'll start with finding the different checks. So I'll start with this. Maybe I have a check here, and then I have one check here, and again I have one check there. So basically we have four possibilities, and I'll give you a moment to figure out to the effect which one of these will actually be the checkmate. So the important things to keep in mind: our piece should not be captured, the most important one, and secondly, the opponent king should not be able to move to any safe square. Okay, keep these two things in mind and you will be able to figure out the solution. Take a moment. Okay, I hope you have found the solution, but let us go through the process. The process is the most important thing. So I look at this possibility, then I think for the opponent. The king goes up to a safe square, or the queen can come down and block the check, or the king can come down here too. So, not a checkmate. I have to let this possibility go. This one, and it is a check. Queen can block it, or the king can move away. So, again, this possibility is not a checkmate. Now we'll go to the third one, Queen d4. It looks like a good move because it doesn't leave any room for the king to move to a safe square either here or here. But as we already know by now, the queen on d4 is unsupported and it can be captured by either the queen or the king, right? So that is also not a checkmate. That leaves us with the fourth and final option, queen to c3. And yes, that turns out to be the right move because the queen itself on c3 is supported by the white king. It is giving a check to the black king, and king cannot move to any of the squares because all the squares are under the control of the white queen. So very interesting checkmate, kind of in the middle of the board. Okay, so the positions are okay, but the very important thing is to go through the process. The process of arriving at the checkmate, the process of finding the possibilities. Since we know all these exercises are checkmate in one, to arrive at the checkmating position, we have to find all the possibilities. That is the most important thing. And then we'll go one by one through all of them, making sure that what? Our piece is safe. The opponent cannot block the check, cannot keep the king to a safe position, to a safe square. Okay? The process of finding the moves is very important, the most important one. Okay, this is a very unique position. Usually, a single bishop is not enough to checkmate the black king or white king. But in this case, the position is very unique and interesting because the escape square, the exit square is blocked by one of the black's own pieces, the bishop on b8. And in this position, the solution is pretty simple because there's only one possibility of giving a check. Turns out to be a checkmate. King cannot go anywhere to a safe square. The escape square on a7 is guarded by the white king. The escape square on b8 is blocked by black's own bishop. Turns out to be a checkmate. Let us go to the next one. Again, interesting position in that it has, whenever a position gives us multiple possibilities of giving checks, it always helps us to analyze, work on our analytical skills, and calculate our way to the correct move. So, in this position, if you see, there are two possibilities of giving a check. One is the knight to f7, another one is bishop to c3, which means we have to think about both of them pretty seriously and figure out which one works for us. So, and you can start your analysis in any order. Um, any order is fine unless and until you are going through all the moves. You have to think about all the moves. For me, for the moment, I'll think about the knight to c7, but then I see the king can move to g8. So, not a checkmate, which leaves me with the only possibility bishop to c3. And yes, it is a checkmate because the escape of the king is blocked by the knight. Right? Okay. Let us see few more examples. I'm sure by now you are able to think in the way required to do a checkmate. This is also slightly complex position, but in chess, you know what is the key skill? There will be a lot of pieces, there will be a lot of stuff happening, but out of all that, we find out what is the key thing, what is the important thing in this particular position. That is all the skill in chess. That is why playing chess builds of concentration, it builds of focus, because out of a million things which are happening, we have to find the thing which is relevant to this current position. Okay, so in this position, again, we know it is a checkmate. And if we start our analysis in the way that we have learned, there are multiple ways to give a check. Knight can go here, knight can go there. And we have this long range bishop which can come up till h6. Okay, so multiple possibilities. And we'll start our analysis randomly. Knight can go to d7, but not a good move. Queen can capture it. And even the knight here was supporting the bishop, right? So king can even go ahead and capture the bishop after the knight moves to d7. So not a good move. Let me try taking the knight to g6. Again, I see g6 is not a safe square. Pawn can capture and even the knight can capture, right? Which leaves me with the third and the final possibility, taking the bishop to h6. And it is a checkmate because there's nothing that can stop the check. The check cannot be blocked. The white bishop on h6 cannot be captured. The white bishop on f7 cannot be captured because it is supported by the knight on e5. And there's no safe square for the black king to move to. Okay, so we were able to do a checkmate. Okay, so I've taken you to the thinking process. Let us see if we have something more. Okay, the knight. This is my favorite position. Very interesting. And I will give you a minute to figure out what is the checkmate. If you find it difficult to do it directly, I will encourage you to set up this position on a real chessboard and then try it to develop a feel of the movement of the pieces. And while you think about this, I will also do that. And let me think about the possibilities. And we have the knight to g7, which is a check. I have the knight to c7, which is a check. And I have the knight to d6. Okay. So I've told you about the possibilities, which I am sure you also found on your own. Now think about them. Which one will be a checkmate? I'll just pause for a bit here and give you time to figure out. So, well, if you figured out the checkmate, excellent, but we'll go through the process. And we can choose any random move to start with. Knight to g7, for example. It is a check, but the king has possibilities of going to two safe squares, which are not under attack of any of the opponent's pieces. Then we have the knight to c7, which is again a check, but not a checkmate. King can again go to both squares, which it had access to in the earlier position also. And now we are left with the final possibility, the knight to d6. And it turns out to be a checkmate because the king is under check. These two squares are blocked by the knight and the f7 square with the knight on d6. So the move that delivers the checkmate is knight to d6. Okay. So I encourage you to go through all the examples and many more, which you'll find at the end of the course. I have put many examples of checkmate because checkmating is the most important skill in chess. And what I tried to do in these few examples is go through the process of finding the different possibilities in a position which gave a check to the opponent king. And then we learned how to go through the moves one by one, make sure that the king cannot escape from the check either by capturing the piece that is giving a check or by moving away or by blocking the check. So if you go through the process in every position, you will be able to find a checkmate in any position where it is possible. With that, we'll look at final one or two examples. Okay. This is slightly complicated, but once you complete the lesson of the pin, you'll be able to do this also. So in this case, I'll just make the move and show how it works. So I have this possibility of giving a check. Now what we say, this rook is pinned because we want the rook to capture the pawn, but that is not possible because the rook is giving a check. As we know already, the rule that it is not possible to leave your king under a check. So the possibility of the rook capturing the pawn is discounted because that would leave the king under a check. The king itself cannot capture the pawn because the pawn is supported by the white king, right? King cannot go to g6 because the king is standing guard. Same way, the king cannot come to g5 because that square is also controlled by the white king. Okay, so with this example, we'll conclude the lesson of one move checkmates. I want you to attempt all the example, maybe multiple times. In some cases, when you are not able to find the correct move, even after multiple tries, you can go to this option of show the solution. It will tell you in algebraic notation what is the solution, what is the correct move which will execute the checkmate. But before you do that, I encourage you to make a honest attempt. If you are not able to solve the position on the screen, I would encourage you to use a real chessboard, move the pieces here and there, try multiple possibilities, and then see if you are able to find the checkmate. It will really help you in developing your checkmating skills. So in this case, let us say, for example, I'm not able to figure out. I'll click on that button and it shows me the checkmate is knight to g6. Knight, I'll take to g6, and yes, it is a checkmate. Okay, so with this, we'll conclude this chapter of one move checkmates. I will again encourage you to do all these exercises multiple times so that your recall becomes faster. You are quickly able to recognize the correct pattern to do the checkmate. Okay, and also after this, at the end of the course, I put a lot more examples for you to practice this most important skill. Okay, with this, I'll allow you to practice and I'll see you in the next lesson.